The discovery of the Titanic in the Atlantic off the coast of Canada has been the dream of countless deep-sea explorers.
Experts have used special technology to map the entire ship on the ocean floor and create its digital twin.
Billed as a once-in-a-lifetime journey to the bottom of the Atlantic, the Titanic sub-expedition promised awe and solemn wonder. But no one aboard could have predicted what lay in wait. Now, more than a century later, we have discovered not only the wreck, but also what was housed within it. A submarine has just found the Titanic's long-lost safe, and what's inside will blow your mind. Let's start from the very beginning. The discovery of the Titanic wreck. Beneath the frigid waters of the North Atlantic Ocean, more than 370 miles southeast of Newfoundland, one of the most enduring maritime mysteries of the 20th century was finally resolved in the early hours of the 1st of September, 1985. After more than 7 decades hidden in darkness, nearly 13,000 feet, or about 4,000 meters below the ocean surface, the wreck of the RMS Titanic, once thought to be lost forever, was discovered by a joint French-American expedition led by Dr. Robert D. Ballard. This momentous find reignited global fascination with the doomed ocean liner, whose tragic maiden voyage in April 1912 had taken more than 1,500 lives. The breakthrough came through a secretive collaboration between civilian oceanographers and the United States Navy. The expedition had 2 primary vessels: the French research ship Le Suroît, equipped with advanced side-scan sonar and crewed by scientists from IFREMER, or the French Research Institute for the Exploitation of the Sea, and the American vessel Nor, operated by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution. Unknown to the public at the time, the mission had dual objectives. However, only one of these was publicly acknowledged. You see, in reality, Ballard had been tasked by the U.S. Navy to locate and survey the wreckage of 2 Cold War-era nuclear submarines, the USS Thresher and USS Scorpion, before being granted permission to search for Titanic. By studying the debris patterns of the submarines, Ballard surmised that the Titanic's wreck would be strewn across a wide debris field, not merely resting in one solid piece as was widely believed. This insight shaped the final phase of the search. On August 22, 1985, Nor began deploying the towed deep-sea camera sled Argo, which hovered just 30 feet above the ocean floor and transmitted images to monitors aboard the ship. For days, the crew scoured a vast area with no success. Then, in the early hours of September 1st, the tide turned. At approximately 1:00 a.m., scattered debris began to appear on screen. First a boiler, then a hull fragment, and finally, unmistakably, one of Titanic's wrought iron davits used to lower lifeboats. At 2:20 a.m., the exact time the ship had gone under in 1912, the bow of Titanic itself loomed into view on Argo's monitors, nearly intact and ghostly under the oceanic silt. The wreck lay in 2 principal sections. The bow, remarkably well-preserved, embedded nose first in the seabed, and the stern, which had imploded on the descent and lay some 1,970 feet away. Scattered between them was a debris field nearly 2,000 feet long, containing thousands of items, from china plates still stacked neatly to shoes, luggage, and pieces of the ship's grand ironwork. The division of the ship into 2 main parts, confirmed by the find, settled a long-standing debate, as survivor testimonies had conflicted on whether the ship split before or after sinking. Unlike previous salvage efforts proposed in the early 20th century, which were hampered by depth limitations and often framed as treasure hunts, Ballard made it clear that he would not disturb the wreck. His team retrieved no artifacts during the initial expedition, instead treating the site with reverence as a maritime grave. The location was left unmarked to prevent unauthorized intrusions, though it wasn't long before Titanic tourism and commercial salvage interests would follow. Ballard's expedition inspired documentaries, museum exhibits, and renewed efforts to collect and conserve Titanic artifacts. Subsequent dives in 1986 used the remotely operated vehicle Jason Jr. to film inside the ship's interior. images that stunned the world and showed Titanic's opulence eerily preserved, from chandeliers to ornate tile work in the Turkish baths. The revelation of Titanic's final resting place was more than just a technical achievement. It was a reckoning with a human story that had captured imaginations for over 70 years. So, what did we find? Early artifact recovery. Following the landmark discovery of the Titanic in 1985, the ensuing years saw a shift from exploration to excavation, with missions aimed at understanding and, controversially, recovering artifacts from the once majestic liner. The first significant follow-up to the 1985 discovery occurred in July 1986, when Dr. Robert Ballard returned to the wreck site aboard the research vessel Atlantis II, this time equipped with advanced remotely operated vehicles or ROVs, notably Jason Jr., a compact submersible tethered to the crew's main sub, Alvin. Jason Jr. was capable of entering the Titanic's interior, transmitting real-time video to the surface. The footage stunned the public and scientific community alike. Inside the ship's ghostly hull, chandeliers still hung over the decayed remains of the grand staircase. Brass fixtures shimmered through the silt, and the haunting silence emphasized how remarkably some sections had survived the brutal crush of time and pressure. Ballard, however, maintained his position. The Titanic was a gravesite, and no artifacts were to be removed during this mission. However, in 1987, a private company named Titanic Ventures, which later became RMS Titanic, Incorporated or RMST, acquired salvage rights to the wreck in partnership with the French Oceanographic Institute, IFREMER. That summer, the joint expedition retrieved approximately 1,800 artifacts from the debris field around the ship. These included porcelain dishes still bearing the White Star Line insignia, leather satchels whose tannins had preserved their contents, and delicate glassware somehow intact after decades on the ocean floor. The mission culminated in a live television special that dramatically opened a recovered safe in front of a global audience. Though the contents were mostly waterlogged paper and coins, the spectacle symbolized the Titanic's transformation into a modern treasure trove. The partnership between RMST and IFREMER continued into the early 1990s. A second major salvage expedition in 1993, using the French support vessel Nadir and submersibles like Nautiel, retrieved roughly 800 additional items. Among the recovered objects were a lifeboat davit arm, brass whistles used by Titanic's crew, and personal effects such as marbles and combs. These items gave poignant insight into daily life aboard the ship and offered new opportunities for forensic study. Curators and conservationists now faced the immense challenge of stabilizing and preserving fragile materials that had spent over 80 years in an extreme deep-sea environment. One of the most iconic and logistically ambitious recoveries occurred during the 1994 expedition. That year, teams managed to retrieve what became known as the Big Piece, a 17-ton section of Titanic's outer hull measuring roughly 26 by 12 feet. Found lying in the debris field between the bow and stern, this massive relic was painstakingly raised to the surface using a complex system of cables and flotation bags. Eventually displayed in exhibitions around the world, the Big Piece offered unmatched structural insight into Titanic's construction, including rivet patterns and paint layers, and served as a visual centerpiece for Titanic memorial exhibits in Las Vegas and Atlanta. By 1996, the focus of expeditions began to pivot. While artifact recovery continued, scientific study took on a more central role. That year's mission emphasized the rapid deterioration of the wreck due to saltwater corrosion and microbial activity, particularly the formation of rusticles, which are icicle-shaped formations created by bacteria consuming iron from the ship's hull. The mission employed upgraded remotely operated vehicles and submersibles capable of high-resolution photography, sonar mapping, and chemical sampling. These tools enabled marine biologists, metallurgists, and engineers to better understand the rate of decay and the potential longevity of the wreck. Turn of the millennium: scientific and cultural insights. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, Titanic exploration entered a new phase. The wreck emerged as a crucial site for deep ocean research, preservation science, and cultural reflection. This period blended breathtaking discoveries with data-driven investigation, enhancing the public's connection to the Titanic tragedy, while equipping scientists with tools to analyze the ship's slow decay and marine surroundings with newfound clarity. By 2000, international collaboration expanded to include Russian deep-sea submersibles Mir-1 and Mir-2, which were deployed from the research vessel Academic Mstislav Keldysh. These manned submersibles descended to the wreck's depth of nearly 12,500 feet and succeeded in recovering key pieces, including the ship's steering wheel and helm telemotor from the bridge area, objects that once guided Titanic's fateful course. Another especially notable find during this mission was a set of 65 unopened perfume vials originally belonging to Adolf Saalfeld, a first-class passenger and perfume maker from Manchester. The vials, though submerged for nearly 90 years, retained traces of their original fragrance, and their recovery helped humanize the tragedy, offering a sensory connection to the lives and ambitions left behind. The submersibles also gathered extensive video footage and environmental data, setting new benchmarks for subsea documentation. By 2004, the emphasis began to shift from manned submersibles to remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, which were increasingly seen as safer, more versatile, and more cost-effective. ROVs such as Hercules and Argus, part of NOAA's ongoing research missions, were outfitted with robotic arms, high-resolution cameras, and sediment sampling tools. These missions focused both on recovery and detailed visual documentation. Among the items retrieved during the mid-2000s were ornate bronze sconces from Titanic's a la carte restaurant, glass-paneled bath tiles from first-class suites, and intact light fixtures. These items revealed the opulence of Edwardian maritime architecture and preserved the cultural aesthetic of the early 1900s. At the same time, researchers began noticing accelerated deterioration in several of Titanic's interior sections. Photographs compared over the years showed that ornate moldings, walls, and support beams had begun to collapse. The most comprehensive scientific milestone came in 2010, with a mission led by the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution and RMS Titanic, Incorporated. This expedition deployed both sonar mapping and photogrammetry to create the most detailed 3D map of the Titanic site ever constructed. Using AUVs, or autonomous underwater vehicles, and ROVs, the team mapped not just the bow and stern, but also the extensive debris field spanning over 15 square nautical miles. Perhaps the most fascinating discovery of 2010 wasn't a man-made artifact, but a microscopic organism. Scientists identified Halomonas titanicae, a newly named species of haloph or salt-loving bacteria responsible for the formation of rusticles, which are stalactite-like growths formed as the bacteria consume iron from the ship's steel hull. This bacterium's discovery confirmed the biological basis of Titanic's decay and posed questions about the long-term preservation of sunken metal ships worldwide. With projections suggesting the entire wreck could collapse within a few decades, the urgency of digital preservation, ethical debates over salvage, and the need for international maritime heritage protections became more pronounced. The Titanic thus transitioned from a mere wreck into a carefully studied ecosystem and memorial, offering lessons in history, science, ethics, and cultural memory. Pause and preservation. Following a quarter-century of artifact salvage operations that had retrieved thousands of items from the ocean floor, researchers, governments, and cultural heritage organizations turned their attention to a deeper, more sensitive question. How should we treat the final resting place of over 1,500 souls? The turning point came shortly after the landmark 2010 expedition, when high-resolution photogrammetry and sonar scans had mapped the Titanic wreck in unprecedented detail. As the resulting 3D models circulated among researchers, one conclusion became increasingly clear. Natural degradation was accelerating, and human interference might hasten the wreck's collapse. The photomosaics revealed that key structural elements, such as the crow's nest, captain's quarters, and the once majestic grand staircase, were either severely compromised or had already disintegrated into the sediment. These images, while haunting, highlighted the need for a long-term preservation plan that prioritized respect over recovery. In response, MS Titanic, Incorporated, the U.S.-based company holding salvage rights, voluntarily suspended artifact recovery missions in 2010, shifting its focus to conservation and digital archiving. This self-imposed pause aligned with growing calls from the international community to treat the Titanic site as a protected memorial rather than an archaeological trove. That same year, UNESCO stepped in. Although the wreck was located in international waters, roughly 370 miles south-southeast of Newfoundland, Canada, the Titanic's approaching centennial in 2012 heightened its symbolic and cultural importance. In 2012, UNESCO officially designated the Titanic wreck under the 2001 Convention on the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage, which extended protections to shipwrecks over 100 years old. Though the United States was not a signatory, this move sparked a broader discourse on responsible stewardship. Simultaneously, negotiations began between the United Kingdom and the United States to forge a bilateral agreement specifically addressing the Titanic. After decades of fragmented legal oversight, the UK had already passed the Protection of Wrecks Order in 2003 under its Merchant Shipping Act. By 2011, both nations had finalized an agreement that granted them shared oversight of any future salvage or research activities. However, the treaty awaited ratification by the U.S. Senate and would not formally take effect until 2019. In the meantime, Titanic exhibitions continued to captivate the public through partnerships with museums worldwide. RMS Titanic, Incorporated, expanded its touring exhibitions to cities such as Las Vegas, Orlando, and Singapore. These exhibitions showcased some of the 500 artifacts previously recovered, including the Big Piece, Saalfeld's perfume vials, and third-class dinnerware, offering immersive experiences while raising awareness about preservation ethics. Each exhibit carefully contextualized the tragedy through passenger stories, ship blueprints, and recreated interiors. One widely attended event was Titanic, the Artifact Exhibition, at the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas, in the United States. Scientific interest did not wane during this decade-long pause. In fact, it evolved. Rather than focusing on salvage, marine biologists and oceanographers began treating the Titanic as a living laboratory. The 2016 expedition aboard the Noé Okeanos Explorer examined the role of deep-sea currents, pressure, and microbial life in the wreck's decay. Building on the 2010 discovery of Halomonas titanici, researchers documented the emergence of entire bacterial colonies feeding off the rusting metal. These findings were significant not only for Titanic preservation, but also for understanding microbial corrosion affecting submerged oil rigs, pipelines, and warships. Public interest spiked again in 2012 during the ship's centennial. On April 14th and 15th, memorial services were held on both sides of the Atlantic. The MS Balmoral, a British cruise ship, retraced Titanic's voyage, arriving at the wreck site on the 100th anniversary of the sinking. Passengers, many of whom were descendants of Titanic victims or survivors, held a candlelight vigil over the coordinates 41 degrees, 43 minutes, 57 seconds north, and 49 degrees, 56 minutes, 49 seconds west. Similar commemorations were held in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where over 150 victims are buried, and in Belfast, Northern Ireland, the ship's birthplace, where the Titanic Belfast Museum was inaugurated in March 2012. This state-of-the-art museum became the largest Titanic visitor center in the world. The final milestone of this era came in 2019, when the U.S. formally ratified the UK-US agreement to protect the Titanic wreck. This move legally bound future American expeditions to abide by strict regulations on disturbance, recovery, and filming. It also clarified that any proposed dives would require governmental approval, effectively ending the era of commercially driven artifact salvaging. Technological renewal and human tragedy. In 2019, history repeated itself. Human-occupied submersibles again descended to the Titanic for the first time in 14 years. An expedition led by Triton submarines deployed their flagship, the DSV Limiting Factor, piloted by Victor Vescovo, alongside explorer Rob McCallum and Titanic specialist Parks Stevenson, aboard the research vessel Triton. Over an 8-day mission approximately 370 miles southeast of Newfoundland, the team completed 5 dives to the wreck site at a depth of nearly 3,810 meters or 12,500 feet. Equipped with native 4K cameras and high-resolution photogrammetry tools, the mission captured the first-ever ultra-high-definition footage of Titanic's decaying grandeur. Viewers were confronted with haunting images: rusted railings collapsing, the crumbling edges of Captain Smith's quarters, and the eerie ghostliness of poignant relics left behind. Scientists noted that salt corrosion, shifting currents, and microbial activity, especially iron-consuming bacteria, were transforming the ship into a fragile underwater shrine. Marine microbiologist Claire Fitzsimmons confirmed that the rusticles seen coating the Titanic were lethal colonies feeding on its steel, hastening its return to the ocean floor. Maritime historian Parks Stevenson conceded that Titanic is returning to nature, with parts collapsing faster than anyone anticipated. These breakthroughs shaped digital preservation efforts, allowing researchers to create photorealistic 3D models and immersive VR experiences to act as virtual time capsules of Titanic's fleeting state. The shift toward high-tech documentation concluded with jubilation and soon after, horror. By 2021, privately funded OceanGate expeditions, founded by engineer Stockton Rush, in 2009 introduced their carbon fiber and titanium hybrid submersible, Titan, claiming it could dive to full ocean depth. This made it the first private craft to do so. OceanGate began offering mission specialist spots at $250,000 per dive. Despite notable success, it impressed few maritime experts who warned of inadequate pressure testing and safety compromises. Those warnings proved chillingly prescient on June 18, 2023. After reaching the wreck site, Titan lost communication with its support vessel, the Polar Prince. Messages from aboard, including a calm, "all good here," at 10:47 a.m., suddenly ceased. 4 days later, a United States Coast Guard team located debris 500 meters from the Titanic's bow. These were fragments of the pressure chamber. They suggested that a catastrophic implosion had occurred, killing all 5 aboard within milliseconds. Among the victims were Stockton Rush, renowned Titanic expert Paul-Henri Nargeolet, British explorer Hamish Harding, and Pakistani-British philanthropist Shahzada Dawood, along with his son Suleiman. The tragedy provoked immediate investigations. OceanGate suspended operations and faced federal scrutiny, including by the U.S. Attorney in southern New York. Former colleagues like David Lockridge alleged safety concerns had long been ignored, claiming Titan was unsafe and lacking key regulatory certifications. Whistleblowers blasted the absence of underwater communication systems, shortcuts made on hull construction, and reliance on gaming controllers in lieu of fail-safe designs. But wait, we're not done just yet. Imaging expeditions and decay. In 2024, RMS Titanic, Incorporated, the U.S.-based company legally empowered to recover artifacts from the Titanic's wreck, unveiled plans for its first deep-sea expedition in 14 years. On February 26, 2024, the company announced an ambitious imaging and research mission scheduled for May, boarding from Providence, Rhode Island. The goal was to deploy advanced ROVs equipped with ultra-high-resolution 65K cameras to capture the most comprehensive visual record of the wreck site and debris field ever undertaken. The team, co-led by marine engineering PhD David Gallo and quality control expert Troy Launay, partnered with Sea Innovation, providers of deep-water ROV technology, and included nearly 20 specialists, oceanographers, archaeologists, and maritime historians, with the express purpose of preserving the Titanic's legacy for future generations. By July 2024, the expedition departed aboard the heavy-lift vessel Dino Chuest, executing a series of meticulously planned dives approximately 370 nautical miles south-southeast of Newfoundland at an impressive depth of about 12,500 feet. Over several weeks, the ROVs, under the vigilant direction of Director of Collections Thomasina Ray and ROV pilot James Penka, scanned every section of the wreck and debris field. The results were staggering. Over 2 million ultra-high-definition images and thousands of hours of video footage were captured to create photogrammetric 3D models of the bow, stern, and extensive debris, approximately 15 square nautical miles in area. Perhaps the most emotional moment came when the ROVs located and documented the 2-foot bronze statuette of the Roman goddess Diana of Versailles, once a centerpiece in the Titanic's opulent first-class lounge. Though first captured on film in 1986 by Ballard, it had remained untraced for nearly 38 years, until its rediscovery on July Trip Day 7 by the avid gaze of James Penka. Found face-up in a sediment-filled breach created when Titanic's bow and stern separated, the statue was hailed as a moment of celebration and sorrow. It was proof of Titanic's enduring opulence submerged in tragedy, yet shadowed by ruptured metal and rusted decay. Yet, for every rediscovery lay a stark reminder. The wreck was crumbling. The cameras documented the collapse of railings, most notably a 15-foot-long section from the bow's forecastle deck, immortalized in James Cameron's 1997 blockbuster, which was snapped on the seabed in mid-2024. The brittle echo of collapsing steel was further corroborated by mapping experts who cross-referenced the 2024 ROV footage with earlier photogrammetry data from 2010 and 2019. They described twisted girders, collapsed decks, and gravity-induced fissures within the superstructure, all under the relentless assault of rust-consuming microbes like Halomonas titanicae and environmental pressures. Marine biologists conducted water and sediment sampling in July 2024, focusing on microbiological degradation and sediment chemistry. Evidence showed rapid rustical growth, confirming fears that the Titanic's steel skeleton is returning to the sea at an accelerating pace. Lead biologist Dr. Claire Fitzsimmons observed that layers of iron-eating bacteria had lengthened by 15 to 20 centimeters since 2019, hastening structural collapse and signifying the pressing need for swift imaging before irreversible loss. The September 2, 2024 press release presented the conclusions. While discovering commemorative relics like Diana provided emotional resonance, the bigger achievement lay in documenting Titanic's final state with unparalleled detail. ROV pilots estimated that 25 to 30% of the bow's exterior, railings, decorative panels, and hull plating were either missing or severely compromised since 2019. A memorial plaque was placed near the wreck site to honor Paul-Henri Narjolet, Titanic specialist and lead underwater researcher for RMS Titanic, Incorporated, who tragically died aboard OceanGate's Titan in June 2023. Echoing these findings, U.S. District Judge Rebecca Beach Smith, presiding over maritime salvage rights, acknowledged in hearings that time was running out. Titanic's structural integrity was diminishing at an alarming rate. She urged RMS Titanic, Incorporated, to prioritize imaging over intrusive salvage, reinforcing the notion that Titanic now exists more as an archival site than a recoverable artifact repository. The expedition ended in September 2024, but its impact reverberated into 2025. Researchers now possess a digital blueprint capturing Titanic's fragile remains just before critical structural collapses likely to occur within the next decade. The escape of Diana and the downfall of the bow railing illustrate how Titanic continues to reveal stories of artistry, engineering, and inexorable decay under tentacles of rust and time. The expedition team is now processing the immense dataset for public release and future educational outreach. The goal is to inspire conservation through virtual immersion rather than physical recovery, a framework telling us that Titanic's remaining story is not always to be extracted, but to be witnessed, respected, and digitally immortalized. So, what has the wreck revealed so far? Well, let's walk through them one by one in detail. Key discoveries and insights. In 1998, RMS Titanic Incorporated recovered the largest intact section of the Titanic's hull, known as the Big Piece, weighing approximately 15 tons and measuring 26 by 12 feet. This massive fragment of the starboard side was retrieved from a depth of over 12,500 feet in the North Atlantic. The operation began with careful planning that spanned months, involving a team of engineers, oceanographers, deep-sea divers, and ROV specialists. The extreme depth and fragile condition of the wreck presented enormous challenges. The hull section had been underwater for over 86 years by that point, encrusted with rusticles and weakened by corrosion, making the piece delicate and vulnerable to breakage during recovery. To locate and assess the hull section, the team used advanced sonar mapping combined with high-resolution photographic imaging to precisely identify the location and condition of the Big Piece. This preparatory step was critical to ensuring the recovery would not cause further damage to the artifact or the surrounding debris field. The recovery vessel, equipped with heavy lift cranes and advanced winching systems, was stationed directly above the wreck site. The team deployed deep-diving submersibles and ROVs equipped with powerful lights, high-definition cameras, and specialized cutting and gripping tools. The ROVs carefully detached the Big Piece from the sea floor by cutting the sediment and any remaining fastenings holding it in place, while simultaneously monitoring the structural integrity of the fragment. A custom-designed cradle was lowered from the surface vessel to the wreck, designed to support the hull section evenly and prevent stress points that could cause damage. The fragment was carefully maneuvered into this cradle by the ROVs, a painstaking process that required precise coordination and real-time video monitoring from the ship. Once secured, the cradle was slowly and steadily lifted using the vessel's crane. Given the weight and size of the artifact, the ascent to the surface had to be managed with extreme care to avoid abrupt movements that could stress the fragile steel. After hours of careful lifting, the Big Piece broke the ocean surface. Following recovery, the hull section was transported to a conservation facility in the United States, where it underwent a lengthy preservation process to halt further corrosion. This included desalination baths to remove salt, careful drying, and chemical stabilization. The goal was to preserve the Big Piece as a tangible piece of Titanic's history and allow it to be displayed in museums to educate and engage the public. Moving on, in 2000, an extraordinary discovery was made when 65 Edwardian-era perfume vials were recovered from the Titanic wreck site. These vials, some still containing traces of their original scents, were found in the luggage of Adolf Saalfeld, a passenger who survived the sinking. The preservation of these delicate glass bottles, despite the immense pressure and cold temperatures at the wreck site, was nothing short of remarkable. Between 1987 and 2010, numerous expeditions led by RMS Titanic Incorporated recovered a wide array of artifacts from the wreck site. These items ranged from everyday objects like china plates and watches to deeply personal belongings such as marbles and chairs. Each artifact provided a unique glimpse into the lives of the passengers and crew, humanizing the historical narrative of the Titanic disaster. Similarly, the Diana of Versailles statue, a bronze replica of an ancient Greek sculpture, originally displayed in the Titanic's first-class lounge, was first photographed in 1986 during an expedition led by Dr. Robert Ballard, but was subsequently lost again. In 2024, the statue was rediscovered lying face-up in the wreckage. Between 2022 and 2024, new imaging technologies revealed significant structural changes in the Titanic wreck. Notably, a 15-foot section of the bow railing, famously featured in James Cameron's 1997 film, was found detached and lying on the ocean floor. The discoveries from the Titanic wreck have profoundly humanized history by revealing personal artifacts, from fine china and children's toys to delicate perfume vials that transform distant tragedy into intimate stories of real lives lost, such as the 65 Edwardian perfume bottles linked to passenger Adolf Saalfeld. Simultaneously, scientific exploration has uncovered the ship's rapid deterioration caused by rust-eating bacteria like Halomonas titanici, with experts predicting a potential collapse of the wreck by 2030. Advances in imaging technology, such as 4K and 65K resolution cameras used in recent ROV missions, have shifted the focus from artifact recovery to preservation through non-invasive documentation, reflecting new ethical and legal frameworks that treat the wreck as a protected memorial rather than a salvage site. Structural losses illustrate how time is relentlessly eroding this underwater time capsule, forcing difficult debates over conservation versus salvage. With artifact recovery largely paused after the 2023 Titan tragedy and growing emphasis on remote imaging and microbial research, the future of Titanic lies in careful stewardship, guided by evolving international laws and safety standards, aiming to preserve the ship's legacy and her passengers' stories. Well, that's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.